Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Welcoming you inside, and it is an honor to reconnect with a friend of the program and a guy who continues to stay humble, stay within his means, and ultimately, his attitude is what's keeping him going here. Happy that he has a chance to wake up and be thankful for a new day. Stuff that I'm still working on as a 38-year-old journalist and broadcaster. We need him more than ever. Steve Gadd, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Hey, man. So I just wanted to ask you, I want to read you a quote from someone and then just get your opinion on it. This is from Barry Atchell. He said, the only drummers who truly had an impact on me were from the bop and hard bop era. Kenny Clark decided to put more time on the cymbals so he could play freer with his bass drum, and that gave everything a whole new feeling and attitude. Papa Joe Jones once told me that he and the bass player used to deal with tuning the drum notes so it would correspond with the bass in a certain way while they kept the four on the floor. He said you could recognize drummers by their bass drum sound. And I wanted you to just talk about that idea because, listen, the bass drum in the 70s came in, and pretty soon, with the advent of huge electronic music, it became almost like machine gun fire. But I want to know from you about this idea of when you first heard somebody putting more time on the cymbals.
No, well, I grew up listening to jazz before I was listening to rock, R&B. Guys I was listening to when I first started out were using cymbals all the time, so I don't really, that's what the guys were doing that I listened to when I first started out.
And tell me about your use of cymbals today. I mean, is it still, because all I'm saying is I talked to Reggie Workman and the late great Joe Sample, and both of those cats, Reggie in particular said, he could go see a set of jazz, a 45-minute set now, and the drummer is technically incredibly proficient and has monster chops, but they don't touch their cymbals. I want you to talk about if that's how you see younger cats use the cymbals now that there's this emphasis on the heavy bass drum.
No, the young guys, the guys that I hear are using them. I hear young guys at different festivals that I'm playing, so I get a chance to hear different bands. But if it's jazz, that's what they're doing. So I'm not sure what these guys are referring to. I use cymbals, depending on the kind of music that I'm playing. If it's more of a funk thing, it might be more of a closed hi-hat. But if it's jazz or straight ahead time, I go to the right cymbal.
Yeah, no, I guess what Barry was saying was that it was just fascinating because ultimately you could differentiate. You guys came up being able to tell the difference between drum. You could tell who the drummer was just by the way that they used the bass drum, and they were obviously using the cymbals. And I'm just trying to figure out, when you first started, if you had a stacker on the top of your head before you went to bed at night, was it Papa Joe? Who were the cats, the Philly Joes? I mean, who were the cats that taught you about how to use the cymbals for colors and accentuation, and ultimately being able to be yourself?
Well, anybody that I listened to that I liked the way they sounded, I would emulate them. And it went from guys like Gene Krupa or Buddy Rich or Louis Bellson Um, you know, Elvin Jones, uh, Tony Williams, Jack DeJohnette. You know, I mean, I loved the way all of those guys, you know, played cymbals and the sound of their drums. Max Roach, Art Blakey, they were all people that I was listening to. That my uncle who bought albums for me to check out would, you know, uh, those were the things that he'd play for me, and they were all playing a lot of cymbals. So that's what I grew up listening to, and those guys were big inspirations.
Can you talk about, like you said, you grew up on jazz? This was something that was sort of in your bag. This was stuff that was in your bag. But how did you bring it along into R&B? I mean, ultimately, I see these Nancy Wilson records, and it's Steve Gadd, you know, and I'm like, this guy got a nickname because he was an unbelievable timekeeper. But how much did that early inundation of hearing the Blakeys and the Roaches and the Krupas using the cymbals, how did that help you move into the realm of R&B soul music?
Well, you know, by knowing that I probably, if I was going to try to play R&B, I'd have to start playing on a closed high end. And it was, so when I heard, you know, a lot of guys that played, that were of the bebop era, were very, you know, they were diehard bebop fans, and they didn't like other kinds of music. And I, for one reason or another, was inspired by different kinds of music, especially, you know, groove music, because I love different grooves. So I was inspired by, even though I started out playing jazz, and I loved all those, you know, I emulated a lot of those people that I already named. I still, you know, was challenged by a simpler kind of music, or, you know, a different kind of, you know, not simpler, but just a different type of thing. And I saw the challenge in doing that. So that's, you know, I think you have to want to do it first, you know, to at least know that you, even though it sounds simple, it's not quite as easy as you'd think. You know what I mean?
You know, I'm not, as a non-musician, could you just go a little deeper? I mean, why is it? How is it more? Why is there more than meets the drum kit, so to speak, in that sense? Because you say it's simpler, but actually, it's more challenging.
Well, it's not more challenging, but it's just, you know, to play good music. I mean, there's more. There's simple isn't as simple as you'd think, and it's, you can't explain it until you try and do it and understand that you know, what you thought was easy, now, even though it sounds simple, is a little bit more difficult, because the notes have to be placed more specifically in the groove, and then the groove has to be a little bit more repetitive, and the bass drum's got to be locked in the, you know, bass. So, I mean, there's more things involved. It's not as simple, you know, to make things feel as good as they can feel.
is there a way to sort of, make it relevant to, gigs that you're on with James Taylor? I often think about you a lot, Gadd, when you're on the road, because it's like, I'm just wondering now how do you guys adhere to the philosophy with Taylor that you never play the same song once? You dig what I mean by that? I mean, the idea of not making it a formulaic experience.
No, we don't. There's definitely a formula for that gig. I mean, it's not just a free thing, There's very specific parts. So that wouldn't be like.
Well, maybe a better example is your recent reunion with Chick. Could you talk about that? I mean, is that more relatable?
Well, that was like a different kind of music. You know what I mean? That was more relatable to what?
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is this. The bottom line is that, with Taylor, it seems to me like cats are paying good money to see what they want to listen and hear what they want to hear, the great tunes. And I see that with Journey, and I see that with Steve Miller Band, and I see that with the whatever group is still living off their greatest hits from 40 years ago, as opposed to Chick Corea, which, by the way, I discovered from Stanley Clarke that you made an album with Return to Forever, which was pure improvisation. Didn't know what you were going to play next. So it's the idea of I guess what gets you off. I mean, how do you continue to stay inspired doing a Taylor set as opposed to just burning and making stuff up on the fly improvisationally with Chick?
They're two different things, and both challenging in different ways. And I consider them, both extremely valid,
Could you, I mean, you haven't, when was the last, had you taken a long time? When was the last time you played with Chick before this engagement?
Oh, we did some recording about a year ago down at his place. And, we hadn't played any of this music for a long time.
Right. Can you talk about, if you could talk about the validity of Taylor versus Chick?
Well, I don't understand. I think they're both valid. I mean, what?
I'm not saying one is not valid than the other. I'm saying that people are put into categories now, Steve, where it's like you're a rock drummer or you're a jazz drummer. Yet you guys, Garibaldi, Shreve, Densmore, Gadd, Keltner, I don't need to keep going on. You guys were masters of all trades. So I'm asking you to explain I'm not saying both are valid, but I'm saying how do you get off on both of them? Because one seems formulaic and the other seems free. And a lot of people don't get that now because they get boxed into, they get branded, the age of branding that we live in. So I just want you to talk about the validity of both of them.
Well, I mean, it's like the music speaks for itself, you know what I mean? I was just lucky enough to have the opportunity to play different kinds of music. And and I never really, put much importance on, categories or labels, or, I never got locked into any one particular thing, which I'm grateful for. Maybe it was because of my attitude. If you're open to different things, then then you're when you hear something, you're awake enough to hear it and like it, and apply it to different kinds of music.
Talking to Steve Gadd here on the Jake Feinberg Show, and I talked to Garibaldi about 3 days ago. I don't know when you got into the Army, but he just said to me that the older guys, when he came in, didn't dig what the younger cats were bringing in because their music was rooted in traditional military musical tradition, Glenn Miller, John Philip Sousa. And when he was coming in, the young people were coming in during Vietnam. They were obviously bringing in all sorts of different influences. I kind of wanted you to talk about what you brought, if you were playing military marches or if you were bringing if you were swinging the band. I mean, it's fascinating to me because I pick up these albums like The Airmen of Note, and I keep expecting to see your name on the back of them. But did you cut albums with the Army, and what was your take on what the kind of music that your generation brought to the military?
Well, I don't really think about what my generation brought to the military. We didn't play marches. I was in like a first I was in a concert wind ensemble, and then they formed like a Buddy Rich kind of band, big band. So it was 1 year I was in the concert band, and then 2 years I was in the studio band. We just, we had good arrangers, and they wrote arrangements of, could be some of the tunes that were popular in those particular years. But it wasn't what we brought to the military. I mean, we were just, musicians in a band in the military, and trying to, play arrangements of things that would be interesting for different audiences. And at the same time, probably promote the Army.
Did you ever get a chance to play with Stan Getz?
No.
What was I got hired to do a film documentary on Stan. I just wanted to know, he was what's amazing to me. I mean, bebop. I'm not even sure if that's a word that Bird or Dizzy would have even used. It was just new music, but I didn't even realize what a bebopper he was. I just kind of wanted to get your. Did you? Where did you?
I just heard someone just played an album and that's. I've been listening to it ever since. It's Stan Getz with Oscar Peterson and Ray Brown, and who was the guitar player that played with Oscar Peterson?
Boy, they put me on. Was it Herb Ellis or maybe Barney?
Yeah.
Maybe Barney. Yeah.
Ellis. So, no drums, but man, this thing I loved it.
Why?
Yeah. Because it was burning, and Stan Getz was like on fire.
Yeah.
The whole band was on fire. And it was like, for that kind of music, those were some You know, they captured some really intense grooves on that album, and I had never heard of it. A friend of mine in Europe, you know, I was over there. We were on tour, and he was played it, and it killed me.
Dude, I gotta. There is the drumless quartet.
Yeah, it's guitar, piano, bass, and Stan Getz. And man, the thing is on. It's great. I love it. And Stan, you know, if you hear him play the bossa nova stuff, that's one kind of Stan. But this is another thing, man. He was like, it was great, man. It makes me smile every time I hear it.
I just, you know, because that was the revelatory thing. As I've been doing 4 interviews with everybody from, you know, Lalo Schifrin to Huey Lewis. You know, I mean, everybody, all these cats collaborated with Stan, but everybody talks about, you know, he knocked the Beatles off the pop charts with "Girl from Ipanema" or all these bossa tunes. But the other album you need to check out is For Musicians Only, which is Sonny Stitt, Dizzy, and Stan from like the mid-'50s.
Oh, yeah.
It's I mean, he was a monster. He added a lot of vocabulary to the music. But, I mean, to me, he was also, you know, well, he was a deeply troubled dude. I mean, he had a lot of issues going on. But I'm you know, I go back to this idea of individuality, and you know, and I just wanted you to talk a little bit about you know, ultimately how you put your own individual sound or individual voice into something that has very specific changes and is very scripted, and is how you can take something that's very straight and still get your own voice in there.
It's if you let the music all be the inspiration, then, and you find the right thing for the music, chances are it's gonna, you know, it'll end up being your voice without you trying to make it anything other than right for the music. You know, it would be my voice because I played it, but it wasn't like it's not like I'm searching for something that has like the Steve Gadd stamp on it. I'm just trying to find something to play that works for the music, and that's how I've always approached it.
Have you? Do you still have a teacher? I mean, in the sense of a life teacher or a drum teacher. When I talked to Garibaldi, I mean, he not only does he still teach, but he still has teachers, and I just feel like in this day and age, with my whole show is kind of predicated on making sure that the elders are given their due, whether it's through bass drum sound or using the cymbals or whatever it is. Do you still have teachers, not necessarily drum teachers, but do you still have people that are teachers to you?
Yeah, I do. I mean, on a lot of different, you know, anybody that you work with that you pay attention to can be a teacher. You know what I mean? I still consider John Beck my drum teacher, and if I had a problem or something, I have other people that I trust, you know, where they are spiritually and mentally to, you know, tell them or ask them, you know, whatever I needed to ask. You know what I'm saying? People that I can go to.
Sure. Why this cat John Beck? How did he become a teacher to you?
Well, he's been my teacher since the preparatory department at Eastman School of Music when I went there. When I was probably about 12 or 13 years old, and then he became the professor of percussion at Eastman School of Music, where he just retired from that, and he was the timpanist in the Rochester Philharmonic.
Wow.
So, he is my teacher, And anybody that I hear that I like what they're playing is because of my teacher, because I end up trying to copy what they're doing, being able to do it,
I dig. All right. Well, we just have one. We had this game last time with Steve. Name that tune. I got one tune for you. We'll listen to it and then we'll see if you can lock it in. All right.
All right.
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, brought to you by the Circle Tree Ranch, the Stereo Hospital, Craig Pretzinger of Allstate Insurance, the Jewish Federation of Southern Arizona, and the Jewish Community Center of Southern Arizona. And we thank them for their support, so we can play tunes like that for great human beings and great musicians. What do you got for us, Mr. Gadd?
No, you know what? I'm drawing a blank. Who was singing?
Well, I was doing research on that as well. The vocals are credited to two women, but that was clearly a man's voice. I'm sorry. Who was singing was your old buddy, a cat that I talked to last week. He was a little under the weather, Mike Mayneri. Mike was singing.
Okay.
So
was that?
Yeah. Take a guess.
Well, was that his album?
Yep, that's right. Do you remember the name of the album?
I don't remember the name of the album.
White Elephant. And
I know. Was that was on White Elephant?
Yeah, and that tune was called Peace of Mind.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, I found the vinyl, Steve, and this is a special group of people.
That was a fun project.
Well, yeah, because it seemed. Did you ever spend any time in Woodstock? Did you ever move?
Yeah.
Up? Can you talk?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about? Because it seemed to me that when I look at some records with Donald McDonald and Russell George and Hugh McCracken, all I'm saying is, did you cut that when you were up there? Because I feel like this was like a Woodstock contingent of sorts.
No, but Mike was living in Woodstock, and there were a lot of his friends would go up there, and and I lived up there, and Tony Levin lived up there around that time also. So, it had that music, had that sort of vibe, But it was like Mike's vibe because he was living in Woodstock. But it was really Mike Mayneri that was sort of, generating all of that stuff.
Were you one of the cats that it was like a place where because you were getting so many studio calls in the early mid '70s? You could go up there and dry out and then come, or not dry out, but go and relax and then drive into the city for the sessions.
I would go up there. I was in a band with Mike Mayneri, and we were rehearsing, 4 days a week, and then I would go into the city and work 3 days. So that's what I was doing then. That's why I was there.
Did you ever hang out or cross paths with the old dirt farmer Levon Helm?
Well, I mean, I know, I've met Leva, and I'm a big fan, and but I know about the those rambles. He used to have the rambles up at his farm.
Exactly, the rambles, the midnight rambles.
Yeah, I heard great things about those nights, but I unfortunately was never at one. But I would have loved to have been, though.
I think more to the point. I mean, being that I mean, I'm 38 years old, and I only really collect vinyl, and I see this community, Eastman School, Mangione, your teacher, John Beck, Joe Beck, Hugh McCracken, Chick Corea, Return to Forever, Lenny White, Larry Coryell. It goes on and on and on. I mean, we live in a very different time now. I mean, you're up in Phoenix. I'm in Tucson. Cats, I mean, the entire group of Tower of Power, they all live in different states. How much did, I mean, you talk about the rambles. How much did community add, or how conducive was the community to adding language to all types of music in the 70s, especially when you were starting to come up,
I'm sorry, what did you ask me?
How important is community to creating vocabulary in all musics? Love it, Steve, is what I'm saying. Because we're all transient now. We all live far apart. Everybody's flying to gigs. Okay, but you just talked about it in Woodstock. Dave Holland was up there. He's driving through town. John Simon sees him. Next thing you know, he's on a John Hartford record. Levon Helm's playing on a Bobby Charles record. Steve Gadd's playing on White Elephant. But it was all built out of community. Just wanted to get your thoughts on the community.
Well, I think the community was New York City. That was the musical community. And the guys that, that's how we met in New York City, and a lot of the recording was done in New York City. People tried to live, to do other things and live in Woodstock and, divide their time, but the community was New York City.
Did you ever get a chance to play with, or did you know the pianist Richard Wyans?
No.
He played with Kenny Burrell, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on Eastman as it relates to this, because he grew up in Berkeley. Richard was born in 1935. He said there was no jazz department at San Francisco State. And some of the musicians, including myself, Jerome Richardson, Cal Jader, Paul Desmond, talked the faculty into having some kind of jazz studies curriculum course. That's how it started. There were no jazz professors that really knew anything about jazz. So we had to do it on our own. And I have a feeling that the precocious Gadd, Levin, Mangione, whoever, Ron Carter was up there, but he wasn't playing bebop at Eastman. Did you do something similar transpire up at Eastman insofar as what was revelatory is I literally transcribed this last night and I'm like, holy crap, these schools, the kids created jazz studies programs.
Yeah, they did, and a good school will be open to new curriculum, and there wasn't a jazz program. We sort of, it just sort of happened. We wanted to play that kind of music, and I don't know how, but it happened. Thank God. That's good.
You can you talk about any role that you might have played coercing a certain teacher? I mean, when you say you wanted to play it, was it just that you started to play it and teachers eventually just adapted to it? Or, I mean, what role you're talking about Desmond, Jader, I mean, that was the San Francisco sound. I mean, I'm kind of just want to know what role you played in pushing that music, because now, I mean, Steve, it's like, and you go to school for music, and it's like tracing paper. It's like, oh, this is the Steve Gadd drum book. This is the you can learn to play like Coltrane, but that doesn't really tell anybody about who they are.
Yeah. So, well, I don't understand what the question is.
Question is, tell me what you specifically did to put the.
What I specifically did, I had nothing to do with Cal Jader or those guys. It had something to do with getting a jazz program in Eastman when I was going to school there. Because when I went to school there really wasn't a jazz program. So I don't know, what those guys did. I'm sure those guys did similar things to get a music program in a school where there wasn't one. You know what I mean? I didn't know that they had done that, when I was in school. So it wasn't like I was trying to copy what they had done. We were just trying to get some different kind of music in the school, and so just sort of happened to get guys together, and then it worked out.
Before I let you go, I just wanted you to talk about how important your wife is and why you love your wife.
Because it takes a strong woman to go through what people go through on the road. The time apart, especially when you got kids and they're young. I mean, it's not easy. She's got my wife is my biggest fan. In fact, I'm getting ready to walk inside a restaurant to have lunch with her right now. And when I'm off the road, and I love spending all the time. And when I'm on the road, I love her to come out and spend time. So that's the way I feel about it.
It's nice to know that you're going to be growing older with somebody that truly can take care of you, or vice versa too.
Yeah, it's just nice to know that you got someone you can hang with,
Right on, man. Hey, Steve, maybe next year sometime in the new year, if I'm up in Phoenix, I'd love to grab a cup of coffee with you at some point, meet you in person.
All right.
Does that sound
good?
Give
me a call. All right, man. We'll do it.
Yeah, have a good lunch. Say hi to Carol, and thanks for hanging out, brother.
You're welcome, man. Thank you.
Cheers. Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Just another day at the office here. We're on the Jake Feinberg Show. Chico Freeman and Steve Gadd. We got a big week coming up. Thanksgiving week. We got Felix Cavallari from the Rascals tomorrow, and then David Margan this weekend on the regularly scheduled edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. That's it for here. We'll be back. Take care. We'll rejoin the Jim Parisi Show in progress.
The example, because that's a populous state and that's where Clinton dominated, right? So let's use that. In California and places like New York or whatever, who's going to win ahead of time. So in this real life scenario, someone like Donald Trump would go out of his way to keep hitting blue wall states and would not spend so much time trying to steal maybe 1 million votes out of California. No need. He's going to lose all the electoral votes. He knows it. It won't even be close. So he intelligently, his campaign, decides to avoid spending too much time there. There's short time on the campaign trail for them in the waning days especially. They will concentrate on states that are so-called swing states, right? So that argument's obvious. And conversely, Hillary Clinton